Hey students, welcome to this week of Study Skills and Leadership. This week we'll focus on test taking. I know no one likes to take tests, but hopefully after this week you can learn how to approach exams in a different light. First, let's talk about test preparation. Once you know the day of the test, write it down, then come up with a plan to study. Your notes will be the main source for studying, so make sure to utilize the note-taking technique we learned from last week that works best for you. Also create your own study materials like flashcards, Quizlets, practice tests, things like that. Studying by just reading your notes can be ineffective. Some additional test preparation tips I like to share are 1. Don't cram. I know it's sometimes necessary, but it's not an effective way to study for a test. Go to review sessions if they're available. They can be really helpful, especially if you're falling behind. Start your review material 1 to 2 weeks before the tests. And finally, there are some resources that may be helpful when reviewing material, but also make sure to be cautious when using them. Some resources to be wary of are SparkNotes. While it gives a good summary, it oftentimes misses details of a reading or a poem. Next, movies. A lot of books have movie adaptations, and while this is a good source of entertainment, they rarely follow the book, so don't rely on the movie too much to give you the information you need. The last resource to be cautious of is Wikipedia. As you all know, it's not the most reliable resource because anyone can add information to it, so it's a good place to start, but make sure to find more reliable sources when studying. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the actual test day. While you've probably heard all of these before, they're important, so we're going to go over them again. The night before the exam, be sure to get a normal amount of sleep. It helps your brain function at its best, and you'll not have the distraction of being tired. The morning of, eat something to give your brain the energy that it needs. Also the morning of, review and glance over your study materials so that it's fresh in your memory. Lastly, accept that you know all that you can know up to this point and that you'll do your best. Now, while you're taking the test, remember to read and listen to any directions your teacher gives. Skim the exam to get a feeling for the type of questions that are on the exam and so you know how to plan your time accordingly. In addition, I'd like to share with you a way you might want to try to tackle the exam. Go through the test and answer the questions you definitely know the answers to. When you're done, go back and answer the ones you left blank. Hopefully, by reading and answering previous questions, your memory was jogged, or maybe a different question had the answer to another question. This happens more often than you may think. Also, if they're essay questions, make sure you leave enough time to answer them. So now we're going to look at different types of questions that can appear in exams and tips on how to approach them. The types we're going to be looking at are true or false, matching, multiple choice, short answer, and essay questions. The first type is true or false, and here's an example. So answer this question, true or false, ITA is housed under the Department of Information Technology. While you probably said true, it is actually false. ITA is housed under the Division of Information Technology, not department. For these types of questions, pay close attention to the wording. A lot of times they'll try to trick you up with wording that seems like the correct answer, but it's actually wrong. The next type of question is matching, and here is an example. Match the ITA class with the year in high school you'll be taking it. So for these types of questions, glance at both columns, read the top left, and then match it with the right side, and continue doing this. Try to work methodically. And the answers would look like this. Cornell notes can also be useful to get used to these types of questions. As you recall from last week, Cornell notes have 2 columns. The left column has the keywords and ideas, and the right side has the description. So you can play your own kind of matching games, cover up the description and look at the words, and try to recall the descriptions, or vice versa. The next type of questions we're looking at is multiple choice, and here's an example. The first thing you want to do is cross out answers you know for sure are wrong. So this question says, what location does ITA not have a cohort in? So you can cross out the locations that you know have cohorts, obviously your own cohort, And we've talked about the different locations in summer, so you should know the answer to this. So by crossing out the obviously wrong answers leaves you with an answer of Menominee. Multiple choice questions are the most common question type in exams. A tip for handling these types of questions are to look for answers that are similar but have subtle differences. In addition, it's extremely important to pay attention to qualifiers. We'll get to what qualifiers are in a few slides. But the next type of question we're going to look at are short answers, and here is an example. Short answer questions can usually be answered in a few sentences. Make sure to answer all parts of the question to get full credit. This answer would be deducted points because it didn't answer why the student wanted to go to spring conference. Answering all parts of the question also applies to essay questions, which is the last type of question we'll look at today. Make sure that you plan out enough time at the beginning of the exam to write in your essay or short answer questions. Let's look at an example. This is a past essay prompt from the ACT. I'm not going to read all of it, but as you can tell, there's a lot of information and it asks for several things in the response. So be sure to read carefully and make sure you answer all parts of the question. It's often helpful to write out a brief outline of what you want to talk about before actually writing the essay. Usually the 5-paragraph essay format will help the most with these types of questions. And as I mentioned before, qualifiers are important to keep an eye out for. So, what are qualifiers? Qualifiers are just describing words that often overstate, understate, or are just right. Some 100% qualifiers always include always, never, and all. Some in-between qualifiers are sometimes, often, and few. These words can be the line between a right or wrong answer. And that is all the content I have for this week. Make sure to take the quiz based on this video and then respond to the discussion prompt. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Have a good week.